Peace, people. Welcome to We Are Our Ancestor, Yemima's World, the Jelly Moose's Cafe. I am your hostess, Yemima, and as always, it's good to be Black in the land of the living once again. Welcome to Hoodoo Sunday, where on Sundays I try to do something related to hoodoo, related to spirituality, and a lot of times related to the Bible because we know that it was hoodoo that birthed the Black Christian church. And so I always want to do something along those lines. For those of you who are headed to your houses of worship, happy Sunday. For those of you who went to early service and are headed to brunch, happy Sunday. Remember, if you are going to brunch, please support Black restaurants. Find a soul food restaurant establishment that is owned by Black people and put your Black dollars in their Black hands. All right. So today, Hoodoo Sunday, we are going to be talking about, or not talking about, but the scripture that supports the this Sunday's um, episode is Ezekiel, and you'll see it on the screen there, Ezekiel 47:12. It says their fruit will be for food and their leaves for medicine. And God is talking about the plants that God has given us on earth, that Queen Mother Nature has provided for us. Plants and trees, so their fruit will be for food, for we're to eat the fruit from the trees. Um, Ignore what it says in Genesis about them not eating the fruit. But then it says in Ezekiel that that's what the fruit's for. But the fruit will be for food, and the leaves again will be for medicine. What you're hearing in the background is just a meditation like video or sounds, and it's nature. You hear the birds chirping. The picture is a beautiful field and mountains with flowers and things of that nature. So it's better, basically a medicine cabinet, if you will, because it has different plants and herbs on the screen. So anytime you walk out into nature, you really walk out into a pharmacy. You really do. We really do. We just have to start to realize that. Also, excuse me, what you see on the screen is a picture of George Washington Carver, who people tend to label him the Peanut Man, but he did so much more than just with peanuts. He worked with a lot of different plants and trees and things, and with vegetables and fruits and things. So I'm going to read first his bio, and then we'll break down some things about him that people probably didn't know. Again, people want to call him um, the Peanut Man, and so much more than that. So first, I'm going to read the bio. All right, George Washington Carver was born in 1864. He joined the ancestors in 1943. Wow, he was born. You think about it, he was born into slavery because slavery didn't end technically into 1865. So he was born into slavery in 1943. That's a long life. God bless him. He was a great Black scientist. People don't look at him as a scientist. Again, they want to call him a peanut man. He was a great Black scientist who was considered the world's top authority on peanuts and sweet potatoes and their products. He was born into slavery. He worked his way through college in the North and then returned to the South, desiring to devote his life to improving the quality of Southern farmlands and the economic prosperity of his Black people. As a faculty member at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, he turned down a number of much more lucrative offers. As the fame of his genius as an agricultural chemist spread, he developed over 300 products from the peanut alone and over 118 from the sweet potato. Now, most times they don't tell you anything about him developing anything with the sweet potato. It's always the peanut. He created peanut butter. And that's what we want to give him credit for. But we're going to find out that he did a lot more than that. He traveled throughout the country lecturing on his science. And on the 31st of October 1933, He visited Georgia Southern University at the invitation of then President Wells. Carver was a sincere and humble Christian. He never hesitated to confess his faith in God and in the God of the Bible, and attributing all his success and ability to that God. In 1939, he was awarded the Roosevelt Medal with the following citation: to a scientist humbly seeking the guidance of God and a liberator to men of the white race as well as the black. Now, I don't know about that. I don't know what white men had to be liberated from, but we have to understand the times. And if they were going to give him a citation, a black man, they would have had to include white people in it somewhere. So they had to put on that he was a liberator of men, both black and white. All right, so this is the following excerpt from George Washington Carver. And he says, my sister, mother, and myself were Ku Klux and sold in Arkansas. And there are now so many conflicting reports concerning them, I dare not say if they are dead or alive. Mr. Carver, the gentleman who owned my mother, again, he was born in 1864. So when he was born, it was in the middle of, or the Civil War was coming to a close. Yet they were still, even in 1864, with the Civil War coming to a close, and this is after the Emancipation had been signed and read. So he would people, our ancestors were still being sold. They were still being sold, and at that point, um, George Washington Carver was separated from his mother and his sister. And again, Mr. Carver, the gentleman who owned my mother, sent a man for us, but only I was brought back, nearly dead with whooping cough, with the report that my mother and sister were dead. Although some say they saw them afterwards going north with the soldiers. My home was near Neosho, Newton County, Missouri, where I remained until I was about 9 years old. My body was very feeble, and it was a constant warfare between life and death to see who would gain the mastery. I was just a mere boy when converted, hardly 10 years old. There isn't much of story to tell. God just came into my heart one afternoon while I was alone in the loft of our big barn while I was shelling corn to carry to the mill to be ground into meal. A dear little white boy, one of our neighbors, about my age, came by one Saturday morning, and in talking and playing, he told me he was going to Sunday school tomorrow morning. I was eager to know what a Sunday school was. He said they sang hymns and prayed. I asked him what prayer was and what they said. I do not remember what he said, only remember that as soon as he left, I climbed up into the loft. I knelt down by the barrel of corn and prayed as best I could. I do not remember what I said. I only recall I felt so good that I prayed several times before I quit. My favorite song was must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free. At the age of 10, I left Neosho, a little town just 8 miles from our farm, where I could go to school. Mr. and Mrs. Carver were perfectly willing for us to go where we could to be educated, as same as the white children. I remained here about 2 years. I got an opportunity to go to Fort Scott, Kansas with a family. Every year I went to school, supporting myself by cooking and doing all kinds of housework with private families. After finishing my bachelor's degree, I was elected a member of the faculty and given charge of the greenhouse and the laboratory. The laboratory work in systemic botany. Mr. Washington said he needed a man of my training. I accepted and came to Tuskegee and have been here ever since. I am more and more convinced as I search for truth that no ardent student of nature can behold the lilies of the field, or look unto the hills, or study even the microscopic wonders of a stagnant pool of water, and honestly declare himself to be an infidel. More and more, as we come closer and closer in touch with nature and its teachings, are we able to see the divine and are therefore fitted to interpret correctly the various languages spoken by all forms of nature about us. So he was talking to nature, he was talking to the plants, and he was not forced into believing in the God of the Bible. He did not learn about the God of the Bible like some of his ancestors did at the end of a whip. He was told what prayer was, what Sunday school was, and he took it upon himself to make that connection with the divine. In lifetime study of nature in its many phases leads me to believe more strongly than ever in the biblical account of man's creation that's found in Genesis 1:27. That God created man in his own image, and in the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Of course, scientists through all of the ages have been searching for the so called missing link, which enables us to interpret man from his very beginning up to his present state of civilization. I am fearful lest our finite researches will be wholly unable to grasp the infinite details of creation, and therefore we lose the great truth of the creation of man. God has indeed been good to me and is yet opening up wonders and allowing me to peek in, as it were. I do love the things God has created, both animate and inanimate. I am absolutely nothing except as God speaks through me. Carver sought to merge science and religion and commented about one of his talks in a letter to a friend. I attempted to give a little demonstration on the creation story as set forth in the Bible and geology. In other words, I attempted to show that there was no conflict between science and religion. I had many illustrations from my geological collection showing many fossils, which told their own story. I had quite a large audience, and they seemed to get a little out of it. It was something so distinctly new to them that they probably overrated its value. Obviously, there was no methodological naturalism for this famous 20th century scientist. So basically, people who are religious don't believe in science, and people who are scientists don't believe in religion. But here you have this man, you have George Washington Carver, who is a scientist and is religious as well. And so he's found a way to mesh the two together. Now, we as spiritual folks know that science and spirituality go hand in hand. We already know that. That's why that we follow the moon signs, full moon, new moons. We follow astrology, astronomy. We follow the planets. We use Mother Nature for medicines. So, as spiritualists, we understand that science and all of those things go hand in hand with spirituality. Religious people, Christians, I don't know about Jewish people, but I'll speak for Christianity because that's what I'm more familiar with. Religious Christians, black and white, don't believe in science. Everything that happens is a result of God of the Bible. All right, I'll put it that way. Carver looked to God for divine inspiration in his work. When he spoke about this in New York City in November of 1924, he said, I never have to grope for methods. The method is revealed at the moment I am inspired to create something new. 2 days later, the New York Times, in an editorial entitled Men of Science Never Talk That Way, they declared that Carver's comments revealed a complete lack of scientific spirit. Now, it's amazing how they said that it lacked scientific spirit, kind of like almost like an oxymoron. And they discredited him. They discredited his race and the Tuskegee Institute. So basically, they said this man must be crazy because God doesn't tell you how to use science in your work. Yet we see it on the screen in the book of God. It says in Ezekiel 47:12, their fruit will be for food and their leaves for medicine. In the Bible, according to Christian, is the inspired word of God. Okay. So Carver responded to the attack. He said, I have read with much interest your editorial pertaining to myself in the issue of November 20th. I regret exceedingly that such a gross misunderstanding should arise as to what was meant by divine inspiration. Inspiration is never at variance with information. In fact, the more information one has, the greater the inspiration will be. Paul, the great scholar, says in 2 Timothy 2 through 15, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Again, he says in Galatians 1 through 12, for I neither received it of man, neither was I taught it, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. Many other equally strong passages could be cited, but these two are sufficient to form a base around which to cluster my remarks. And in the first verse, I have followed and am yet following the first word of study. I thoroughly understand that there are scientists to whom the word is merely the result of chemical forces or material electrons. I don't belong to that class. And while in your beautiful city, I was struck with the large number of tarots and utias displayed in many of your markets. They're edible roots. They're imported to this country largely from Trinidad, Puerto Rico, China, Dutch Guinea, and Peru. This man knew what he was talking about. He was looking at these roots and these herbs and understood where they originated from and how they was getting to this country. Oh my God. And just as soon as I saw these luscious roots, I marveled at the wonderful possibilities for their expansion. Dozens of things came to me while standing there looking at them. I would follow the same or similar lines I have pursued in developing products from the white potato. I know of no one who has ever worked with these roots in this way. I know of no book from which I can get this information, yet I will have no trouble in doing it. If this is not inspiration and information from a source greater than myself or greater than anyone who has wrought up to the present time, will kindly tell me what is. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8 through 32. Science is simply the truth about anything. Friends and Christians supported Carver as a result of the New York Times attack. And he responded to a Christian friend on January 15th, 1925. My dear brother Ward, many thanks for your letter of January 4th. How it lifted up my very soul and made me feel better after all God moves in mysterious ways and his wonders to perform. I did indeed feel very badly for a while, not that the cynical criticism was directed at me, but rather at the religion of Jesus Christ. Dear brother, I know that my Redeemer liveth. I believe through the providence of the Almighty it was a good thing. Since the criticism was made, I have had dozens of books, papers, periodicals, magazines, personal letters from individuals from all walks of life. Copies of letters to the editor of the Times are bearing me out in my assertion. Pray for me, please, that everything said and done will be to his glory. I'm not interested in science or anything else that leaves God out of it. So basically, we could say what the old Christians used to always say, what the devil meant for harm, God meant it for good. Other letters sum up his whole attitude on science and Christianity. One letter says, my beloved friend, keep your hand in that of the Master. Walk daily by his side so that you may lead others into the realms of true happiness, where a religion of hate, which poisons both body and soul, will be unknown, having in its place the golden rule way, which is Jesus is the way of life, and that he will reign supreme. Then we can and talk with Jesus momentarily because we will be attuned to his will and wishes, thus making the creation story of the world non debatable as to its reality. My beloved friend, God is infinite, the highest embodiment of love. We are finite, surrounded and often filled with hate. We can only understand the infinite as we lose the finite and take on the infinite. Carver quoted liberally from the Bible, and then they have some passages that he would quote. But this man was a religious spiritualist. because he understood that nature was God's pharmacy. He doesn't talk about taking pills. And I have this book that I purchased about him, and I just want to read a couple of things. I'm not going to read the whole book, but there were some things that stood out to me um, in this book. So the first thing that stood out to me was that he called his place where he did his work God's little workshop. I thought that was very sweet that he called his pharmacy God's little workshop. So he also discovered that the sweet potato and the peanut were crops which the soil brought forth in greatest abundance. He preached about rotating cotton crops with peanut and sweet potato crops. When the farmers followed his advice in large numbers, they discovered they were producing more peanuts and sweet potatoes than the market could absorb. So to solve the problem, he had so in solving one problem, he had created another. And there was a real problem to face. So he didn't tackle it by asking the government to give federal aid, nor did he demand that it restrict planting. So basically, it's saying that he was telling the farmers to one season grow cotton, and in the same soil, the next season grow sweet potatoes and peanuts. But they were harvesting so many sweet potatoes and peanuts, they didn't have a demand for it, for its usage, because they were probably just eating it as peanuts and sweet potatoes. So they had no use for the abundance that they had. So instead of saying to the government, you know what, restrict planting, he said, you tell you what. So in a chemical laboratory, he discovered 300 new uses for the peanut and 150 new uses for the sweet potato. And before he was through, he had rebuilt the agriculture of the South. So now they have the abundance of these peanuts, but they have uses for them because of George Washington Carver. And now they have this abundance of sweet potatoes. They now have uses for them because he's created and he's developed uses for them. Edison offered an immense salary for him to come and help him, but he declined. And a few years later, he declined another offer from a firm that was going to pay him $100,000. And he said no. He declined the money for himself, but asked that it be given to the farmers in the South. And as of the writing in this book, he didn't accept any salary. He would wear an old black suit that he bought and paid for $2. And he always kept a flower in his button. He was asked at one time to make something for diabetic patients. He went into his laboratory and prayed. And almost immediately there came to him a method of producing a flour that was sweet and palatable and yet entirely devoid of all sugar content, a real delicacy for diabetic patients. One day he noticed a great amount of small cold potatoes that were going to waste. Like all root crops, the sweet potato was highly perishable. So he converted these unmarketable potatoes into cassava starch, which until now we have had to import from the West Indies in South America. So he made flour that was sweet but had no sugar content. He took the potatoes that were perishing and turned them into cassava starch, which before we had to get from the West Indies. I'm telling y'all, this man is more than a freaking peanut man. And again, I told you that he called his place where his workshop God's little workshop. Um, he would enter the sacred place. He called it his place of miracles. No books were ever brought in there. He didn't need books. He would talk to the little peanut and it would reveal its secret to him. He would lean upon the 29th verse of the first chapter of Genesis. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. What other materials does he need than that promise? He says, I talked to the peanuts, I talked to the sweet potatoes, and the clay of the hills, and they talk back to me. And here I have great wonders that we bring forth together. He points to an array of bottles containing specimens, and of the 300 uses for the peanut, 301, he corrects him. He says that morning he discovered a new one. Wonders of wonders. What would happen if this old man could live a few years longer? The interviewer thought to himself. And along the clay walls, he added there, again, there was no need for books, merely another promise in the Bible. I will lift my eyes into the hills from which cometh my help. In my room, I will show you a purple, the lost purple of Egypt. Only in one other place in the world can they find that clay. So he had this purple clay in his little in God's little workshop that you can only find in Egypt. And the interviewer said, "Well, how did you find it?" He said, "I talked to God one morning, and He led me to it. He led me to it." He talks about again the sweet potato and the uses that he had for the sweet potato. Um, Sweet potatoes is definitely something that diabetics use. My sister used to eat a sweet potato every other night. She was diabetic. My other sister now eats sweet potatoes. But he talks again. He says that he's up early in the morning. He wakes up around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. He goes out into the woods to have his talk with God. And there he gets his orders for the day. He is alone there with things he loves the most. He gathers his specimens and study the great lessons that nature is so eager to teach all of us. When people are still asleep, it's when he best hear God. And we know as spiritualists, we've always heard that the ancestors, the spirits, God, whatever it is you want to call it, are better reached, or you can inquire of them better between the hours of 3 and 5. And George Washington Carver says he wakes up every morning at 4 o'clock, goes out into nature and communes with God. That's what he does. Um, so yeah, and also even when he was creating things from nature, there was people that would come to him for treatment. They thought he was a miracle worker, and they would come to him for treatment, and he would tell them, "I can't. That's not what I do. I'm not a miracle worker. I can't pray over your child and they're going to recover. I can't lay hands and they're going to recover. That's not what I do. What I do is I go out and I talk to nature and I talk to God, and they reveal to me what plants and herbs to use to make medication to help people. But um, my prayers for you is no different than your prayers for yourself." So yeah, so that's it for today. I just wanted to um, talk about. I know that in Hoodoo, a lot of us um, we we work in nature. We work with herbs. We know that our ancestors were herbalists. They were root workers, and so was George Washington Carver. That may not be what he identified with, but he definitely practiced a branch of hoodoo by working with nature, because that is what we do. Not all of us have that gift. He was an amazing man. He had an amazing gift. He had an amazing connection to plants and had an amazing connection to the divine. All right, so go out there, you my beautiful hoodoo people, and Gather your plants and your herbs and know that each time you do that, you are definitely walking in the footsteps of an amazing ancestor, George Washington Carver. All right, you know the drill. Love yourself, love each other. Um, give yourself some grace, give each other some grace. Honor your ancestors, they will honor you. We are our ancestors. Thank you for subscribing. Continue to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, take care. Peace, family.